again, this is Jesse with another Unboxing Board Games. This time we're going to do an overview of the Japanese deck building game called Tanto Cuore. You may have seen an earlier video of this Japanese deck building game without the English paste-ups when I just did a unboxing, but this time we're going to do a brief overview of how the game gets set up and some of the gameplay and how the rules differ from Dominion and how they compare. There's a few different reasons why I wanted to do another video and do an overview. One is that there's an English version of the game out now that plays just the same. It's an English translation, so it's a little more accessible to everyone now. And in the Japanese version of the game, there's been a couple of expansions released. This video only covers the core set, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. Similar to how Dominion is set up, you've got your coin cards, or in this case they're hearts. You get values of 1, 2, and 3. So think copper coins, silver coins, and gold coins. You've got a couple of victory point cards. There's a 1-point card with some additional game text and a 6-point card. There's a bad habits card, which is kind of like the cursed card, except that you can purchase it and put it directly on your player's, the opposing player's deck. And then there's an illness card, which again you can purchase and give that to the opposing player, which disables one of their private maids. Something that's different about Tanto Cuore is there's cards that there's only one of them in the game. There's not a whole stack of them. In this case, you've got a deck of these cards that are all different. They're not the same, like your Kingdom cards in Dominion would be. And there's only 2 of them available at any one time. And so when one of these gets purchased into the deck, or in this case it's called employing the maid, it gets replenished from one of those cards in the face down deck. And that adds some variation throughout the game. Similar to Dominion, you've got something like Kingdom cards. There's 10 of them out here, and that's 10 out of the total of 16 in the base set. So that's another variation from game to game that's available, similar to how Dominion works. Another similarity to Dominion is that you have a starting deck of cards that consists of 7 1-heart cards, or 7 copper coins, and 3 1-victory point cards. And you go ahead and draw 5 of those cards. I went ahead and drew cards for 2 players, and we'll go ahead and go through a few turns just to give you an idea of how Tanto Cuore plays. So if we look at the starting player's hand, they've got 5 1-heart coins, or cards. So yeah, that's similar to 5 copper coins. So we're going to skip ahead through the phases since there's not a whole lot of options in the beginning hand. We're going to skip ahead to the employment phase, and since we've got 5 hearts, we can go ahead and employ a private maid that's worth 5 hearts, or costs 5 hearts. At the start of your turn, you may look at one random card from another player's hand, and you can keep that card. If you do, then the other player gets to look at a random card from your hand and keep that card in exchange. And the exchange is permanent. So that's kind of an interesting private maid. So the way the playing area is set up, you've got the card deck, the deck that you're building. That's like, they call that the waiting room. You've got your play area where I've spent my 1-heart cards. You've got the private chamber that has the private maids in there. And then as we finish our turn, we go through the Dominion cleanup phase. We put those in the discard pile. The discard pile is called the kitchen entrance, which, if you're familiar with how mansions are laid out, or old plantation homes and things like that, the back entrance of the house was usually through the kitchen, and that's where the servants would enter the mansion So that's kind of thematic in that, you know, you're playing some, you know, rich owner of a mansion, and you've got all these maids and servants, and as you employ them, they enter in through the kitchen entrance, and as you give them orders, the servants recirculate back in through the kitchen entrance. So we'll finish out the turn by drawing the next 5 cards for the hand that'll be played in the next turn. I'll just set that down, and notice we've kept out the private maid that stays out from turn to turn. If we get any more private maids, that one will get covered up, and you'll have a new ability that typically gives you some sort of benefit at the beginning of your turn. So if we go over to the second player, look at their hand. They've got a victory point card, which I can't do much with in this starting turn, but I've got 4 heart cards, and so if I skip ahead to the employment phase, I'll go ahead and hire Genevieve, cost 4 hearts, and later on when I play this as like an action card, or in this game it's called a servant, she'll provide draw 1 card and an additional heart and an additional order, which is kind of like an additional buy in Dominion. And so I'm going to take all these cards and place them in the kitchen entrance and draw 5 new cards from the waiting room. Take a look at that hand before the next turn, and go back over to the starting player's hand, and that player takes their turn. And in their hand they've got 3 of these victory point cards, which get tallied up later, so I'm just going to kind of set those down. And I've only got 2 heart cards that I can employ a maid with, so we'll have to go with something a little cheaper. These cards are kind of interesting, these 3 here. They're part of a set, essentially, and it kind of makes sense to include all 3 of them in the kingdom cards when you're playing this game, because they interact with each other. Essentially, let's say I go ahead and buy Rouge. Her card is like the other 2 in that if I use my servant or my buy action, I can place that in my private chamber, and then I get the benefit at the end of the game where it says you get victory points for each set of Azure, Viola, and Rouge. They're basically they're sisters that all have the same last name. And so they play off of each other, and if you've got a combination of both types, you get 3 victory points, and for all 3 types, you get 7 victory points. So that's a card that's not going to help us out a whole lot until the end of the game if I can get this card into the private chamber. But right now, it's a good card to have because it's going to give me an extra heart. Not a really good card, but it'll do for now. So I'm going to leave the private maid out. I didn't use it this turn just because there's not a big point in me trying to steal cards from the other player. I may end up getting just one of their 1-point victory cards, and they may steal one of my good cards this early in the game, so not interested in doing that. I turn my cards back into the kitchen entrance, the discard pile, and now in order to draw 5 new cards, I'm going to have to shuffle these and then draw 5 cards for that player's hand and kind of catch a glimpse of what that player's hand is going to look like. And go back over here to the second player and take their second turn. Again, I'm just going to kind of drop these 1-point victory cards. They don't do a whole lot for me right now. And I don't have a private maid out in this private chamber for this player. I don't have an action card, so now I'm just going to go to the employ phase, or the Dominion buy phase, with my 3 heart cards, and we're going to employ Saffron. She costs 3 hearts, and this is another card where, depending on what combination of cards you have in your personal chamber, you'll get a certain number of victory points at the end of the game. But for the time being, used as an action card or a servant card, you'll get a benefit of +2 hearts. So take those cards, put them in the kitchen entrance. Again, try to shuffle them up as best I can, for example. Draw 5 cards for the next hand. Take a look at that hand. It's going to play out pretty similar again. Now, for this player, they've got their private made, we're going to go ahead and trigger that ability by taking a random card from this other, or looking at a random card from this other player's hand, and I can choose to take that or not. I'm going to pass. Don't really need more of those copper coin cards. Since we didn't keep that card, the other player doesn't get to take a random card from this hand. So we're going to go on to the servant phase, where I can either play this card now as a servant and get the additional heart or copper coin out of this card, or I can wait till the employee phase and move this card into my private chamber. Let's go ahead and do that, since I don't have a whole lot of purchasing power with these 3 copper coins or 3 hearts. So I'm not going to employ a card from the kingdom cards here. I'm just going to employ this general made and set this card out as a personal made. So that goes in the private chamber next to the private made, and the rest of the cards in my hand, I'm just going to discard those to the kitchen entrance and draw 5 cards. Now the reason I had placed this card in the private chamber is that, for one thing, it's going to take it out of my playing deck. This card is going to stay out here from turn to turn. It's a card without a whole lot of benefit. It only supplies 1 heart when I use it as an action card. So let's just go ahead and get rid of it out of the deck, kind of streamline things, and also give the opportunity later on for additional victory points if I can get any more of these crescent sister maids out here in the private chamber. Just take another quick look at the hand there. Go over to this player, toss out these victory point cards, and as we saw, we've got 3 1-heart cards. And let's purchase another saffron for 3. Discard pile. Grab my 5 cards for the next hand. And one thing I noticed I forgot to do is, when I purchased that private made, another new private made comes out of the deck, and you can see it's another different card. So we'll take the starting player's turn again. Drop these 2 victory point cards. Got 3 heart cards. Let's go with a saffron. Draw a card. That's going to go into my hand for the next turn, and I'm going to have to shuffle these. Here's the next turn's cards. And here, taking the second player's turn, don't have any private maids out, but we do have a general maid that acts as an action card that you'd have in Dominion. And this general maid, during the servant phase, we get to draw an additional card, we get an additional heart, and get an additional employee. So let's go ahead and play that. Take an additional card. It's just a victory point, so I'm gonna kind of set that aside. And our total purchasing power is 5, because we've got 4 1-heart cards plus the additional heart from this general maid. And let's have this player purchase this 5-heart private made. So we'll pick that up and put that in the private chamber, and then we'll discard all of these cards to the discard pile, the kitchen entrance, and then we would draw additional cards for this player, but I think you're kind of getting the hang of it. I'll put this other maid out, and that's how Tanto Cuore plays. The game is going to play until 2 of the stacks of maid cards is used up, and at that point you go through players' decks and count up how many victory point cards you've got. Victory points may be in the upper right-hand corner of the card for some of the cards. For others that have the question mark there, they may have a variable number of victory points. For the Crescent Sisters, they've got one victory point, but may have additional victory points depending on what kind of combination of those cards you have in the private chamber. So overall, it plays more thematically than Dominion does, but the overall mechanic and flow of the game is extremely similar to Dominion, but it's kind of a refreshing change of pace when you've played Dominion. So check it out, Tanto Cuore.